I am trying to judge less and appreciate more. Throughout my life, I've struggled with self-image, some self-criticism, and definitely some unrealistic expectations that I put on myself and others. And over time, these really created a negative thinking pattern that eventually pushed me into a few different depressive episodes. And I just want to talk about some of the steps that I'm trying to take to lessen those harsh opinions and harsh judgments. So back when I first started my personal development journey about 6 years ago, one of the first practices that really made an impact and shaped my mindset for the better was to identify and try and reduce the amount of time that I had harsh or unfair criticisms on others or judgments on others and myself. And once I started to notice how often I resorted to unfair, mean, honestly, thoughts, I realized that I really needed to make a change. This is still something that I really struggle with, but these are just some of the steps that I'm taking to try and reduce these feelings and be a more positive person overall. So before I start talking about the steps that I've taken personally to reduce those feelings and those judgments, I first just want to talk about, what is negative judgment, why is it rarely useful, and maybe even the benefits of decreasing that kind of judgment. So don't mind me looking down at a little notepad. So a negative judgment involves harsh criticism of or forming a bad opinion of someone's character or behavior. A neutral judgment can simply mean making an evaluation, such as deciding if someone is a good fit for a job or making a decision based on facts rather than personal beliefs or emotion. So from those two definitions, you can kind of see that, a negative judgment is usually influenced by your emotions and is a lot of the time unfair. And it's not really based on fact. It's kind of just based on your opinions or feelings. All right, so now that we've got a quick definition, what are some of the benefits of decreasing those negative judgments? For me personally, it's been an increase in patience, gratitude, and the capacity to love someone as they are. So obviously, if you're nitpicking or you're being excessively judgmental, it makes it easier to want to change someone or to be upset with the way that someone is. When you kind of let go of those feelings and just accept people for who they are, it makes it a lot easier to love them, be patient with them, and just have those positive feelings overall. So another benefit that I noticed, which was really a big shift for me, was that I had increased positive feelings internally. And I was even less critical to myself when I was being less judgmental or critical to others. So, thinking positively about someone made me think more positively about myself and vice versa. So I think if you're stuck in a negative thinking pattern, it can be quite a vicious cycle, but you can also use that momentum to kind of go in the other way. If you start thinking positively about others, you might start thinking positively about yourself. At least for me, that's what I felt. Last benefit that I've noticed is that others feel a bit more at ease around me if I'm being less judgmental. Anyone knows, if you've got a family member, a relative, or a friend that's always nitpicking or always making little harsh comments or judgments, and you kind of feel a little bit uptight around them, a little stressed. You're like, well, what are they going to say about what I'm wearing? Or they're going to criticize me about this. You just feel a little on edge and a little stressed. And then you can compare that to someone who never judges you, who listens to you, who validates how you're feeling, and who is just a good time overall, and you feel a lot more relaxed and less stressed around them and just feel like you can be yourself. So those are some of the benefits that I've really noticed. Okay, so now that we've covered that, onto the steps that help me actually implement this and change my mindset. So the first one was to just identify when I was making a harsh judgment on someone or myself, or placing a criticism or just a mean comment. This is definitely difficult to do unless you're actively trying to notice it. So if it's a habit, you're already geared towards that way of thinking, it can just happen without you noticing. But once you start to pay attention to your mind and notice those little habits, it starts to get easier over time. So, I would just monitor myself if I was out in public, I was out at the shops, and I was making a comment to myself about how ridiculous someone else's outfit was, or how they looked like they were mean, or how they couldn't walk fast enough or get their food fast enough or whatever. I would just notice it and that's it. That was the first step. Just notice them. If I criticized myself and, made a judgment about how I acted in a certain social interaction or cussed myself out, I would, again, just notice it and just let it be and try and let go of it if I could. So that was the first step, purely just taking notice. And it starts off hard, but gets a lot easier as you practice. All right, so the second step that I used, once I got better at identifying when I was making one of those harsh judgments or criticisms, is I would just try and stop it. So if I noticed it in the moment, I would just cut it. Let's say, again, I'm at the shops, use that example, I'm making a judgment about someone else or unfair comment or mean comment. As soon as I feel it coming up or as soon as I notice it, just cut it right there. Same goes for myself. If I'm beating myself up, just stop the thought straight away. I wouldn't try and necessarily replace it with anything. I would just stop it, and obviously those thoughts came up all the time. So it was a lot of internal self-talk where I would be starting a judgment and then be like, stop. I would start the judgment, then I'll stop. I'll start the judgment, stop. And it was like very, not a fun cycle. And it was a bit humbling to realize how often that I was being in that negative mindset. So the third step that I used kind of combines the first two, is when I noticed that judgment come up, obviously I would stop it. And then the third step was to replace it. So I would replace it with something positive, or I would try and just revise it into something a bit more neutral. So again, examples of people being at the shops or me judging what someone's wearing or how they look might be like, again, that person, like, what the fuck are they wearing? Or why can't they move fast enough throughout the shops? And then I would stop it and be like, oh, they're probably nice. Or maybe they're stressed. Or maybe they're confused about what they need to get at the shops, which is why they're taking so long. If someone's driving poorly, again, maybe they're stressed. Maybe they got someone in the car that's distracting them or whatever. I would just replace it and with something positive. And the same goes for me. If I came home from a social interaction, and as I mentioned, I have very high expectations of myself. If I made one awkward comment, I'd probably focus on that. And that would be my takeaway for the night. But I could have had plenty of other good ones. So I would just, let's say I get home, I'm like, why did I say that? That was so dumb, that was so stupid, like embarrass myself. And then I would notice the thought, stop the thought, and replace it with, well, I had many other great interactions. Or another positive comment. Be like, well, at least I showed up, at least I went, at least I put myself out there. So just replace all these negative judgments with positive ones. So I wasn't trying to get rid of the habit of negative judgment. I was just trying to replace it because it's not going to go away. Any overthinkers or negative spiral thinkers that are watching know that it's really, really difficult to just think positively or just be happy. So I would just accept that I was going to make those judgments and just replace them. And then over time, it became a lot easier for that to just be my default. I just became a much more happy, grateful, kinder, more gentle person because I was thinking more positively. All right, so last thing from me is, how did I actually, make those changes happen and not just think about them? Well, first was really having a journal practice or having a bit of an evaluation of the day and kind of thinking about how well I actioned all those steps that I mentioned. So I would say, was I judgmental today? Was I able to replace them? I would just consistently think about it. And that really helped me get it in my mind and make it easier for me to notice in the moment. So I would just think about it every day. It's easy enough to say, I'm going to be less judgmental, I'm going to be less of this, or I'm going to do more of that. But unless you're actually actively thinking about it, a lot of the time it's just doesn't happen. So there we go. Those are some of the practices that really made a big difference on my mindset and made me a much more happy, patient, and loving person, and someone that's a lot more confident in myself. So again, these changes took a lot of time. They're not fully actionable steps. I'm sure you got to change it to suit you. But for me, I just wanted to talk about my experience about trying to be less judgmental, to appreciate others more, and the benefits that can have. A bit convoluted, but I hope you guys got some value out of it. Thank you very much.